You know what almost every gardener gets wrong when they first start using wood ash? They dump it straight onto the soil and think it's a miracle fix. I've seen this in raised beds, backyard plots, and even small hydro setups. The truth is, raw ash burns plants, spikes pH unpredictably, and wastes a ton of nutrients that could otherwise feed your crops for months. If you've been struggling with uneven growth or soil that refuses to retain nutrients, this is the exact problem. By the end of this video, you'll know how to turn that dangerous ash into a nutrient powerhouse your plants can safely use over weeks, not hours. And if you're serious about following along with precision, I'll also show you a tool I use to track the exact temperature during ash processing. The link to it is in the description from Influencers and Associates. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed. I share practical, tested techniques for raised beds, container gardens, and even hydro systems that actually work, not the generic stuff you see floating around. Most gardeners never stabilize their ash, and it ruins their soil. Here's the core issue. Raw wood ash contains potassium, calcium, and trace minerals, but it's highly alkaline. If you just sprinkle it on your soil, it reacts immediately. Seedlings can get burned soil pH swings dramatically, and over time those nutrients are lost to runoff or leaching. In raised beds, I've seen this shrink root systems and slow growth dramatically. In hydroponics, untreated ash can clog lines and alter solution pH to the point that even the most robust plants stall. So the solution isn't really about avoiding ash, it's about stabilizing it, By turning ash into these primitive pellets, nutrients are released slowly, safely, and, well, predictably. This method works brilliantly for raised beds, backyard vegetable plots, and even in hydro systems where precision really matters. Now let's talk about how to make ash pellets that actually feed your plants. First, you'll need clean, completely cooled hardwood ash. That's absolutely essential. It's best to avoid softwood ash whenever possible, since the nutrient profile is weaker and, honestly, often more variable. So take roughly 1 part ash, add half a part water and about 1/4 part binder. This could be fine clay, finely ground compost, or even well-aged leaf mold. Mix it all thoroughly until it sticks together, but make sure it isn't sloppy. Now, you'll want to form small pellets, each about the size of a marble. If they're too large, they'll release nutrients too slowly, and if they're too small, they'll dissolve way too quickly. The goal here is to get a steady, consistent release over several weeks. Just spread these pellets out on a tray and let them dry for a couple of days, either under partial sun or in a well-ventilated area. Once the pellets are dry, you can go ahead and lightly cure them in a shallow container, turning them every couple of days. This step kind of mimics what compost does naturally. It helps stabilize the pH, prevents nutrient burnout, and it allows for that slow release your plants will actually benefit from. If you're after maximum precision, I personally use a heavy-duty compost thermometer. The one I recommend, there's a link in the description, is the RioTemp 36-inch model. It lets me monitor internal temperatures during curing and makes sure the pellets aren't overheating, which would otherwise destroy those delicate nutrients. In hydroponic setups, I often check the solution temperature against the pellet curing just to make sure there's no shock to the system. When it comes to applying ash pellets safely in raised beds and backyard plots, I usually go for a pretty straightforward approach. For a small raised bed, I tend to sprinkle around 1 to 1.5 cups of stabilized pellets per square foot, just lightly working them into the top 2 inches of soil. This amount is enough to feed heavy-feeding vegetables like tomatoes or peppers for about 4 to 6 weeks, and you don't have to worry about causing any pH swings. For root crops like carrots or beets, I go a bit lighter, closer to half a cup per square foot, so those early, tender roots aren't shocked. In backyard gardens, honestly, distribution matters more than the exact quantity. You'll want to scatter pellets evenly along rows or between plants and then give everything a light watering. Unlike raw ash, these pellets won't create concentrated hotspots that could burn your foliage. I've actually seen peppers double their yield and leafy greens keep their vibrant color for months by using this method. So, why do hydroponic gardeners need to stabilize ash too? Well, hydroponic growers often think ash is off limits, but properly cured pellets actually work pretty well if you add them to a slow-release nutrient compartment or maybe a separate media tray. Now, if you directly add ash powder to the solution, it spikes the pH and can clog up those emitters, but these pellets dissolve gradually, releasing potassium and calcium over several weeks. Honestly, it's best to start small, maybe about a half cup per 4-foot tray, and just keep an eye on your pH and electrical conductivity. Over time, you can scale up to meet your plant's nutrient demands without risking system failure. Let's talk about the trade-offs everyone ignores. I'm going to be frank here. This method isn't instant. If you're looking for a 1-hour miracle fix, this just isn't it. The work up front, mixing, forming pellets, curing, well, it really does require patience. But here's the payoff. Your soil retains nutrients, longer seedlings survive better, and overall plant health improves dramatically. Compared to raw ash or commercial quick-release fertilizers, you get steady, predictable feeding without having to step in again and again. One thing I tell newer gardeners is, avoid chemical quick fixes just because they're convenient. I've tested this in raised beds for, 4 years, and I can say with certainty that a batch of properly cured ash pellets provides months of nutrient release with far less risk of nutrient burn than anything you buy off the shelf. Practical tips from years of testing. Consistency is everything. Make sure every pellet is roughly the same size and composition. Too much water in one batch and you'll get cracking. Too dry and the nutrients won't release properly. Store cured pellets in a dry, ventilated container. If humidity gets too high, they'll clump and partially react before you use them. I often label batches by date so I know which ones are ready for spring planting, which are for mid-season crops, and which can be saved for fall. In hydroponic systems, I check both pellet dissolution and nutrient solution stability. I pair pellet feeding with a pH buffer, usually calcium sulfate, or sometimes just a small dose of citric acid, depending on your solution's starting pH. This balances the slow-release nutrients without shocking roots. For those of you raising heavy feeders like tomatoes, peppers, or brassicas, this method is honestly a game changer. I've seen healthy root development, consistent leaf color, and steady fruiting without the peaks and crashes that come from raw ash or synthetic fertilizers. Why using a compost thermometer matters. Now, this might feel a bit overkill, but honestly, temperature is everything. During curing, pellets that get too hot lose nitrogen and can even volatilize potassium. That's why I rely on the RioTemp heavy-duty compost thermometer. With its 36-inch stem and rugged design, it reaches the core of large batches to ensure even curing. I've linked it in the description from influencers and associates because, really, it's a tool every serious gardener should own. Even in small backyard batches, monitoring internal temperature ensures that every pellet performs as intended. Wrapping it up and taking action. So, the primitive ash secret isn't primitive at all. It's tested, reliable, and repeatable. Stabilized pellets turn a dangerous pH spiking material into a slow-release nutrient powerhouse. It works in raised beds, backyard gardens, and hydro setups. The steps are simple. Gather ash, mix with binder and water, form pellets, cure while monitoring temperature, and apply in measured amounts. Done properly, your plants will thrive for months without risk. If you found this useful, subscribe to the Farm Logic channel. I share advanced real-world gardening techniques that actually work and save time and resources. Share this video with a friend or fellow gardener who's tired of wasted nutrients and inconsistent yields. And if you want to get the RioTemp heavy-duty compost thermometer I mentioned, the link is in the description from influencers and associates. It's an investment that pays for itself in better managed nutrients and healthier crops. Remember, the difference between a mediocre garden and one that produces top-tier food consistently isn't luck. It's knowledge applied correctly. Stabilized ash pellets are just one tool in that toolbox, but they're a tool that makes a measurable difference. Use them right, and your soil will thank you for months.